this morning I'm going to show you how I do my slip trailing, which is a fairly common way of decorating. It's a very old-fashioned way of decorating. They used it a lot in the 18th century, and they tended to just use a white slip on a red clay background. I use a white clay and I use a charcoal coloured slip, and then you can colour it in. You get a lot more variety with your colour. This plate I made 2 or 3 days ago. It's gone quite nice and firm, and I've put the circles on the wheel, so I hold the trailer still and put the circles on, and then work my design between them. This little tool here is a little treasure. I've had it for donkey's years. It's an enema syringe, an old-fashioned one, and there aren't many of them left, so this is my pride and joy, this enema syringe. But it means you can, it's full of slip, which is clay and water that's mixed down, and it has some colour added to it. So we have a white clay background, and the slip is charcoal coloured, and you can see it comes out in quite a nice fine dribble, and you can use it for icing on the clay. So we just colour it in slowly, just a bit at a time, and if you make a mistake you can wipe it off with a sponge, but you've got to be careful to wipe it off really clearly, or it leaves a big smear, which is most annoying. It's very hard when you're making handmade stuff not to leave marks of your hand on it. I think people are quite used to things that are produced by a machine, and they're not used to things that are made by hand. It's very satisfying. Right, when that's done, I'll let that dry out. I'm doing a Pisces one, so I've got the Pisces to go in the middle there, and to fill the rest of it in. I'll let that dry out for about a week, and these ones here, these have dried already. You can see they're quite sort of well, they're quite brittle, but they're nice and dry and porous. And I've just started putting some colour on this. And this is underglaze colour, which is just refined metallic oxide. And you can just get it inside the lines and get a nice shape. And you can see it dries on quite quickly. And when it soaks in, it dries and just leaves a powdery coating on the surface of the pot. And when this is all coloured in, I'll put the green leaves in and red hearts round, so it should look quite nice when it's finished. I'll fire it in the kiln, and the first firing goes to about 1120 centigrade, and that takes 24 hours. It heats up very slowly and then it cools down very slowly. If it heats up too quickly, the pot will probably blow up or it'll crack, so you've got to be very patient. And then it cools down very slowly, because again the clay contracts as it's cooling. And if it contracts too much, if you open the door too soon, the cold air goes in, the clay contracts and cracks, and you've got to be very patient with pottery. This is one that's been biscuit fired. This is just the clay. This has been biscuit fired, so it's quite hard. This has had the hard firing, and then what I do is I dip them in glaze, and the glaze is basically just powdered glass and water, and dip it in. The glaze dries to a powdery coating. And then again it's fired over 12 hours. It heats up very slowly. At the height of the temperature, if you look inside the kiln, you can see a little spy hole, and you can see the pots gradually glowing red when they get to about 1120 centigrade. And then they suddenly shine, and that means the glaze has melted. So you knock the temperature off, and you let them cool down slowly over 12 hours, and all being well, they come out in one piece. And it's lovely. It's like having Christmas every day when you open the kiln. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a disaster area. So you never, even though I've been doing this for nearly 50 years, it's always a great surprise when things come out in one piece. But it's always it's always sort of, you're never quite sure what's going to come out of the kiln. Right, I've got one here. I'll show you. Hopefully it'll come out all right. And this one's cooled down. You see that's got a nice shine on it. The glaze has melted in a satisfactory way, and it just gives it a nice finish. And that'll be a very hard finish and quite strong. So that's the finished pot. But that's probably about 3 weeks old, because it took me a week to do that one, because it took ages. But anyway, that's a brief introduction to slip trailing.